back to another video. In this video we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to be doing an Amiga 500, or a 16-bit Amiga anyway, top 10 of my favorite games. Now these will not be the top 10 best-selling or the top 10 favorites of anyone else. They're just the top 10 favorites of me. The reason being that it's now 30 years ago since I got my first Amiga, which was an A500 in 1988. So 2018 seems, well, it's about time I did a video really about my top 10. So I'm going to look at the games that I played back in the Amiga 500 era. I'm not going to feature any AGA games at all. These are my games, the ones I play, and the ones I continue to play to this day when I play on the Amiga, emulator, or anything else that I use. So here is a look at some of my favorites. Straight in at number 10, we have a strategy game by Ocean Software. Released on the Amiga 500 in 1990 and the Atari ST in 1991, this is a fantastic game that many of you may not have heard of. It has beautiful soundtrack, amazing graphics, and is pretty fun to play, if a little bit slow and lumbering. But it is pretty nice to look at, and as I say, the sound is very good. It is an action strategy game where you have to guide your fallen downed aircrew through Vietnam. It's not easy, it is a very difficult game. Well, there are a couple of little glitches in the game which help you along somewhat. If you haven't tried it, try it. It is really good. I thoroughly recommend The Lost Patrol at number 10. In at number 9, we have Alien Breed by Team 17. Although a fairly late release as far as my games go, this is a 1991 game for the Amiga, and even though it is a Gauntlet-inspired, Alien-inspired game, it is absolutely fantastic to play. The game was initially going to be an official Alien game, however, Team 17 never managed to get the license. So it was turned into an Aliens-esque type film. A little bit of Laser Squad going on, and a little bit of Alien Syndrome. But it is good fun, the graphics are beautiful, the sound is very good. It can be a little bit repetitive in the way that you have to find keys to open doors, but hey, Doom did exactly the same thing, but in 3D, and that seems to have gone pretty well. Alien Breed is great fun. It is again an extremely difficult game. I've never quite managed to get to the end, but who knows, one day I might. Alien Breed. In 1992 I went over to a friend's house and was met by the then spectacular RoboCop 3 playing along merrily on his Amiga 500 Plus. The Amiga 500 Plus was new, and so was the game. This was RoboCop 3 and it was pretty damn impressive. Part flight sim, part 3D shooter, part driving game. This was fantastic. Didn't really suffer from lengthy loading times, although there was a bit of disc chomping going on here. It was a little bit Chase HQish, but better in every way. There was a maze section where you had to drive a car. There was a 3D section where you had to shoot terrorists and avoid the hostages, of course. And of course there was a gyro pack section where you were flying a rocket controlled thing like Rocketeer. But overall, it's the driving section that I remember, and the thumping soundtrack. This really is a superb game. As I say, created by published by Ocean Software, not created by them. It was developed by Digital Image Design Limited and released in 1992. It is a thoroughly superb game, but don't bother watching the film. The film's pretty shite. Released in 1991, the world would never be the same upon the release of Lemmings. Everyone knows Lemmings, everyone loves Lemmings, and if you don't, there's something wrong with you. It is a great game that has been published on probably every single system in the world ever, apart from the ZX80, although that may change. Released by DMA Designs and published by Psygnosis in 1991, it came to the PlayStation, the Amiga, the PC, and many other platforms. It is a puzzle game, and what a puzzle game it is. Part platformer, part strategy, part, well, time-consuming game. It's fantastic. The basic premise of the game is that you click on each lemming to use one of their attributes, whether it be a builder, a digger, a miner, or whatever, and you tunnel, chomp, climb, float, and basically fall your way across various landscapes to get to the exit, without of course plummeting to your death, which is easier said than done. The Amiga version had the bonus of having a two-player mode. It was a simpler joy to use, and I think to date it is the only version that had a two-player game, but correct me if I'm wrong. But there we go, that is Lemmings on the Amiga. Great fun, great game.
The desert, unchanged for millions of years, yet witness to a biblical prophecy come true that one day the meek shall inherit the earth.
If there's one thing the Amiga could do well, it could do movie-style games. Film-style games, and It Came from the Desert is one of the best. It is a typical B-movie type game where you take the role of some kind of geologist. I can't remember his name. Brett. Well, I don't know what his name is. But anyway, he's a scientist or a geologist or whatever the hell he is in B-movie land in an ant-infested 1950s town full of all the usual things that go on in a 1950s town. It is a superb game, also a great game with good music and good audio. Thoroughly good fun. It's part strategy, part point-click adventure, point storytelling game, and it is all done very well. It has various action sequences. There is a game world map. There are various locations upon this map that you can visit to try and solve the puzzle of what the hell is going on in this crazy American town. There are vehicles you can drive and fly. There are racers to be raced. There are maidens to be wooed. It's great fun. Don't expect the game to be over very quickly though, as it is quite a long running game. There are, I think, a couple of endings to the game. There's a good ending and I think a bad ending, although I'm not sure if that's strictly true, as I've never managed to get to the end. But either way, one of my favourites. Thoroughly good fun and a cracking soundtrack as well. Now, one of the earlier games I had on the Amiga was FA-18 Interceptor, which was by Electronic Arts, and it was programmed by Bob Dinnerman, with a cracking soundtrack which was copied on the Top Gun theme, and if you listen carefully you can hear this in the music. The game is set in the San Francisco Bay Area, and you can fly around various landmarks such as Alcatraz Island, although most people I suspect flew around, under or into the Golden Gate Bridge. It was a great game, great fun, a little sparse and a little basic by today's standards, but we're talking about a 512k Amiga here, and we're talking 1988. The combat is good, it is good fun. If you have a slightly accelerated Amiga, then the fun can be ramped up a little bit as the frame rate increases to quite a playable rate. I do remember playing this with a 68060, and it really does go like stink. What else can I say? You can even land on an aircraft carrier, should you wish. You can engage in dogfights against MiG-29s. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a Boeing 707 that darts around the skyline from time to time. I'm not sure if you can shoot this down, but even if you can, I don't think the game likes it. There is a bug in the game where you can actually land on the aircraft carrier upside down and the game won't crash. And I think Bob Dinneman knew about this as it was reported in an early beta of the game, but decided to leave it in as he thought, well, that's a bit of a giggle really. So there we go, FA-18 Interceptor, a very, very good game. Back in the day it came with a one of those disc protection wheels. Do you remember the cardboard things that you spin? A little bit like the Monkey Island one. What a pain in the butt that was. This is fantastic. This is one of my favourites. What a great game. Oh, haven't I told you what it is? It's Rig Dangerous, and it's on the Amiga. Get it now. What can I say about Rig Dangerous? As far as platformers go, this has got to be one of the best, and I don't care what you say. I don't care about Manic Miner, neither do I care about your Jet Set Willy. This is Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Well, kind of. Set in 1945, British agent Rig Dangerous travels to the Amazon jungle to search for the lost Gulu tribe. His plane crashes in the jungle and Rick must escape from the enraged Gulu. Rick starts the game in a cave running from a rolling boulder, very much like Indiana Jones. From the next level then he goes to Egypt, and the third level I think is the Nazi stronghold. Never actually made it that far, as the game is a bit of a biatch. It's very difficult, it's very unforgiving, and you have to memorize every trap, and it's very hard. What can I say? This game was brilliant. It comes on one floppy disk, or at least it did back in the day. Released in 1989 by Rainbird Software and developed by Core Designs. It was released on the Amiga, the Amstrad, the ST, the 64, Spectrum and many other formats. But without doubt the best format to play it on is of course the Amiga. Released in 1993, this game became what would probably be as close as we would ever get to Command & Conquer on the Amiga. Now I know the Command & Conquer has been kind of ported over, but it doesn't work very well, if at all. However, Dune 2 does work, and it works extremely well. We have decent music, we have good graphics, we have sound, and we have speech. So what's not to like? Well, the gameplay is a little bit flaky. The units don't always do what you say, and quite often they get stuck behind other units. You cannot control the units. I think you can't control more than one to attack enemy units, which is a bit of a pain in the butt, but that's just the way the game is programmed. Everyone knows the Dune 2 story, I would imagine, who was watching this video, but if you don't, Frank Herbert's science fiction story of the same name. It's an RTS, it's very much Command & Conquer, but this is on the Amiga. If you know Warcraft, if you know Command & Conquer, well, this is the same thing. Collect resources, build a base, destroy your enemy. One of the problems with this game is, I think you have to destroy every unit before the game will let you progress. But Dune 2, upon its release on the Amiga, was pretty damn impressive. Sadly, Westwood never followed it up with Command & Conquer, and for that, I will never forgive them. Dune 2.
Moving out. Yes, sir.
Now straight in at number 2 is a game that could well have been my number 1. It probably should be my number 1, but for the sake of argument, it's number 2 in this particular list, and here's why. Even though this is the game that made me want to buy an Amiga in 1987 when I saw it, I think it was in a magazine in about 87. I couldn't afford an Amiga 1000, and I'd never seen one, so it was unlikely I was going to buy one. But by 1988, Commodore in their wisdom could release the Amiga 500, and what a fantastic machine that was, and of course it meant that I could play Defender of the Crown. Now I am pleased to say I have met Mr. R.J. Michael, who programmed, if not all, then most of the programming of this game. The graphics were done by James Sachs, or Jim Sachs, and the music is by Jim Kumo, whose name I've probably said wrong. But this game blew me away, blew my mind. In fact, it still does. The gameplay is not that good for various reasons. One of the reasons is that the game had to fit on 2 floppy disks, and another reason is that Mindscape were under enormous pressure to get the games released, and that meant in turn that Cinemaware had to get the game made, created and working in a few short months of 1986. This indeed put pressure on everyone involved, and the game suffered greatly for this. I remember this version. This is the version that I've played probably 1,000 times, and you can complete the game, if you're very lucky, in about 15 to 20 minutes. If you're very unlucky, you can't complete it. The problem is that the AI is very much randomized. You can beat the game on some playthroughs, and on other playthroughs it will absolutely cane you, and that's just the way it is. But the artwork by Jim Sachs is amazing. The audio is fantastic. This is indeed Ivanhoe or Robin of Sherwood or Robin Hood on a floppy disk for the Commodore Amiga. This is the game that is rumoured to have sold more Amigas than Commodore themselves, at least via advertising. If you haven't played it, go play it now, but play it through your 1986 eyes, not through your jaded 2018 eyes. Rose-tinted glasses are most definitely needed. And in at number 1 we have another cinematic game, but this time not by Cinemaware, but this time by Delphine Software, and this is the 1992 game of Flashback: The Quest for Identity. It's a science fiction platform game with heavy on the emphasis of storytelling. The game is beautiful to look at. It's expertly directed, beautifully crafted levels, great sound, cut sequences, and it came off floppy disk. It's absolutely fabulous. This is a truly amazing game, and the fact that it gets remade now from time to time shows just how good it is. Released on the Amiga, the PC, the Mega Drive, the SNES, PC CD-ROM, 3DO, Dreamcast, Switch, iOS, Android, and so on and so forth. The game just keeps on going, but that's another story. What we're talking about here is the original game on one of its original platforms. The game stars Conrad B. Hart, who is chased by mutants and crash lands his bike on the jungles of Titan. He finds a holocube in his pocket which has a recorded message for him telling him to meet his friend in New Washington. You have to then make your way through the jungle and escape to the city, and then the game goes from difficult to extremely difficult and continues in a very similar vein until the end of the game, which ultimately is a Running Man style sort of level. It's very difficult and very good, although I've only ever made it there once myself, which shows how hard the game is. The game itself had a sequel called Fade to Black, again by Delphine Software in 1995, although perhaps not as well remembered as the original platform game. This was the first foray into 3D, but unfortunately it was only released on the PlayStation and PC. So there we are. That's my top 10. Those are my favourite games on the OCS and ECS Amiga 500. They are some of my favourites and I still play them now. Some of them more than others, it's fair to say, but they're always on there at some point. What I'm going to do now is just put a few games on that didn't make it into the list but almost did. They know they could be there. If I ever come back and revisit this list, then I may well include them. But that's it from me, so thank you very much. There's a special mention at the end of this video for my patrons. I've just opened a new Patreon page. If you wish to join in, please do so. It is gratefully accepted and gratefully received. So that's it from me. Take care. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.